Welcome back to a Slice of Empathy podcast. This is a show where we dive deep into the conversations that matter most. And today I'm joined by a truly insightful guest, Michael Brook. He is a couples counselor, a relationship coach, a hypnotherapist, and a published author that specializes in rapid change for couples who face relationship challenges. And in his book, Thriving in the Flux, 9 Timeless Rules for Relationship Happiness and Success, he lays out powerful principles that will help couples go from the brink of breaking up to discovering love and connection. And with a no-nonsense, results-driven approach, he's worked with individuals and couples from all backgrounds, whether they've been together for 4 months or 53 years. He also helps singles looking to make better partner choices and those who are healing from past relationships so they can move forward with clarity and with confidence. So if you're looking for real, actionable advice to transform your relationships, this episode is for you. Let's dive in and welcome Michael to the podcast. Well, thank you so much for joining today. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey, maybe how you got into hypnosis and relationship counseling?
Well, a long time ago, I was very interested in relationships, but also how the mind works and how people get the results they get in their lives. And so I started studying something called NLP, but then I kind of transitioned into focusing on hypnosis and hypnotherapy. And also then I started, once again, I was really interested in relationships because the greatest satisfaction people have in their lives, it comes from the quality of the relationships that they have. And so I was also wanting to work with people and create rapid, powerful, positive change for them. And since relationships are the biggest relationship are things that give us the biggest level of happiness, it made sense to work there. So I studied a heap of relationship material and did a bunch of courses. Ended up finding myself doing this now. I work with about 300 couples a year. So, and I do sort of roughly around 900 sessions a year.
Wow, that's quite a few couples. Really impressive. Was there
Yeah, it is.
any? Yeah, like that's a lot to think about. How many
Mhm.
sessions would you say per month that you typically have?
Somewhere around 80 to 100, depending on the
Wow.
month.
So you keep pretty busy. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, well, it's kind of, I call my business Rapid Couples Counseling because I wanted to find out what worked the best and what got the best results and what got the fastest results. And so I have to see many people in order for my business to make sense. So simply because I normally only see my clients 3 or 4 times. Like most relationship counselors and couples counselors take between 12 to 20 sessions to get any forward movement, but I'm normally done by 3. So maybe 4. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really impactful because I was mentioning actually that was my next question and basically was what inspired you to create the rapid couples counseling? I mean, the name says it all, right? Just what you're just telling me. And kind of like how besides the 3 sessions that you were mentioning, is there any other differences that you would say would be from maybe traditional therapy?
Well, yeah, I'm very direct, right? And so often people come to me and say, tell us what to do. Like we don't know what to do. And so I'm really, really direct and I go, okay, this is what you need to do. How do I know this works? Because I do this with 300 couples in a year. And so I'm really, really, really direct. I don't skirt around issues. Like if someone has got problem say in their sexual relationship, I go, okay, let's talk about that. Or someone's got issues in terms of conflict or communication, or if there's been infidelity, or like I just hit things head on, right? And that speeds up the process a lot. Additionally, there's one thing I actually emphasize the most on is both people taking responsibility for their emotional states and both people bringing the best themselves to each other, right? I say this hundreds and hundreds of times. The single greatest determinant whether couples can successfully navigate the crisis that brings them to my attention is whether or not both people can confront themselves and bring the best themselves to their relationship on an ongoing basis. For most people, it's really easy to point the finger at your partner and go, well, they need to change. Most people are reluctant to look at themselves in the mirror and say, what can I do to bring the best of myself to a relationship partner? And what can I do to bring desire into the relationship?
Yeah. Have you ever encountered a scenario where there's maybe one partner that's just like very headstrong and that, for lack of a better term, like believes that they're 100% right. They don't believe they did anything wrong. How would you navigate a situation like that?
Well, yeah, I encounter that quite frequently. Well, I basically say, like, I'm really, really direct. Say, this is what, you know, often the person who thinks they have the least to change is a person that needs to change the most. Some people's self perception is wildly inaccurate. And so I'm really happy to go, hey, this is what I'm saying is both people need to bring the best game. And I emphasize that this is what works. And you can choose to do what works or choose to not do what works. It's up to you. Some people do come into a couples counseling session on the expectation that you're going to change their partner so they're not challenged or that they become happy if I hammer their partner into the shape they want them to be in. And I will steadfastly refuse to do that because that isn't what works. Most people don't want to be hammered into a shape that their partner finds acceptable. People want to have a relationship that's grounded in mutuality, as in both people's needs met, that's grounded in both people bringing desire to each other. If one person seeks to hammer their partner into a shape that they want them to be without considering their own contribution to the relationship, well, that tends to not work and it tends to not last. And I'm interested in making the change I work with people work and last. Some people, if and because I will steadfastly refuse to do the hammering of their partner, some people don't like me,
Right.
and that's
I
okay.
And it's interesting because I feel like a lot of folks will go to their first session fully expecting to be like, I'm going to counseling or to therapy or whatever, so I can have the therapist tell my partner why the million reasons that they're wrong. And so I think there's a lot of misconception if like someone fully believes that it's the other person that is causing like the damage in the relationship. I've had a few folks tell me like there's been different scenarios in therapy sessions where they would go and the other person's like, I'm just here for you. So it's definitely like they're both not on the same page. And I feel like it's a situation where you're not really going to get anywhere if you have that mentality.
Yeah, that's right. And I emphasize all the time, you work on you and you work on you. You work on what you're bringing to a relationship and you work on your bringing to a relationship. And so I do that for a number of specific reasons, one of which is it stops the kind of, you know, I don't want a relationship counseling session to turn into a bitch fest where they're just they're yelling and screaming at each other. They
Yeah.
can do that at home for free instead of paying me a couple $100 an hour, right?
Right.
And so, but I like once again, I'm really, really interested in what works. When I say you work on you and you work on you, that's actually what drives the work I do really fast. That's what makes the rapid element of the relationship work.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
last year I had an interesting thing. I normally see my clients a fortnight apart, and I had four couples show up on one Saturday, and the first three followed that instruction that they worked on themselves and focused on them being desirable and bringing desirable behavior to the relationship. And the fourth couple, and so I gave them all the same instruction. And so 2 weeks later, the first three couples, I saw them in the same sequence, a fortnight apart. The first three all carried out the instruction. They went, wow, things are heaps better. Like, it's amazing how fast it happens because they focus on working on themselves. And then the fourth couple showed up a fortnight later. They said, oh, we tried what you said for a couple of days. Then someone said something that pissed the other person off. Then we went back to fighting what we've done for decades. What you do doesn't work. And I'm like, just that morning, I had three couples come in and saying, hey, it works really, really, really like crazy. And they came in and going, yeah, no, what you're saying doesn't work. It's like, it's not that it doesn't work. It's just you didn't do it,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, so I want to pivot a little bit because I'm curious about the hypnosis portion of therapy that you have in your practice. How would you say that this plays a role within relationship healing and transformation within your sessions?
Okay. So a lot of people will bring something into a relationship that can substantially compromise the relationship, whether that's an addiction, either drug addiction, gambling addiction, porn addiction, alcohol addiction, marijuana addiction, food addiction, smoking, all kinds of different addictions. People sometimes bring addiction into a relationship and that can tear the relationship apart. Additionally, people can have mental health issues that can also place tremendous strain on the relationship. For example, depression, anxiety, stress, you name it. And so when I work with couples, either one person might have one of those things or both people might have one of those things, in which case I will kind of, outside of the couples work, I go, look, in order for the relationship to improve, you specifically need to work on this, right? Or you need to work on that. Or together they might need to, work on something and that hypnosis can help with. So any repeating pattern of emotional states or behavior can be changed with hypnosis and hypnotherapy. As far as I'm aware, there's only a few things that can't, like desire to eat, desire to sleep, desire to drink water, desire to go to the toilet, fear of loud noises, and fear of falling. Everything else is up for grabs. So any repeating pattern of emotional states and behavior can be changed. And so if one person's bringing one of those kind of complicating factors, as in an addiction or a mental health issue, if that's removed or changed, then the relationship can get rapid improvement really quickly.
Can you walk us through an example of how rapid change works, particularly in a relationship that might be like really struggling?
Well, for example, I had a couple last year. They came to me and they said, "We're fighting all the time." Okay, cool. So how do you know when to fight? Like, what's the boundary condition that says a fight's going to kick off, right? And they go, "Oh, well, at night, one of us on the way home from work picks up 2 bottles of wine, and we drink a bottle of wine each night. But the person that gets the end of the bottle first picks a fight with the other one, and we have a raging fight every night." Right? So I went, okay. So the problem isn't the relationship. The problem's the alcohol. So you take away the alcohol, the fight doesn't happen. So I said, okay. So I flipped into hypnotist mode. I did an alcohol addiction removal hypnotic process with them. 2 weeks later, the guy comes back going, "Michael Brook, you're a genius." And I'm like, okay, what did I do? And he said, "Oh, we stopped drinking all that wine. We have a couple of days off, or if you have wine, have made 1 or 2 glasses, and that's it. And we stopped fighting. Our relationship's heaps better. And oh wow, that's amazing."
Wow.
Like it wasn't rocket science. Like it's not like I'm building an orbital launcher. I was like, okay, so figure out what the boundary conditions are and make the changes to the way that people deal with things. So that's a basic example. The vast majority of my clients come and see me between the 6 to 10 year mark. And there's a reason why is because relationships go in reliable, repeatable stages. Would you like me to explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, curious because like we also hear about the common term, the 7-year itch, and I was just about to ask if there's like any
Yep.
relation to that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's a thing. So roughly 70% of my clients turn up somewhere between the 6 to 10 year mark. So relationships go in reliable, repeatable stages. The first step is the attraction phase. It's a honeymoon phase. You remember that experience, Valerie?
Yeah.
Everything's all amazing. You feel incredible. You're having sex like crazy. You're giving your partner your time and attention. You're having time apart, and you're making each other feel desired all the time, right? But that only lasts for about 12 to 18 months, right? Normally around 12. And then, so couples slide from the attraction phase into the appreciation phase. And in the appreciation phase, you learn to appreciate all the things about your partner that nobody else knows about. How nice it might be that, they might cook for you on a night when you're really tired, or they might take the bins out, or, in the US, they might shovel snow when it's snowing all the time, right? So you learn all those you learn to appreciate things about your partner. Now, normally around the 2 to 3 year mark, that's when people either decide to get married or decide they're going to be together forever, on the erroneous expectation that nothing's ever going to change. And the problem is it's always wrong, right? People's expectation of long-term happiness is often wildly inaccurate. They think it's the first two, how happy they were in the first 2 years is what's going to happen forever. But the problem is people end up taking their partner for granted and they get complacent and they stop putting in the effort they did at the beginning.
Yeah.
Now, normally around the 3 year mark, couples get in a habit of relating. So, or the habituation phase, where, Friday night you might go to a restaurant or a bar, and Saturday morning you might go to the markets, and Sunday mornings you might have sleep in Sunday morning sex, which works right up until kids happen. And then once the kids show up, that sleep in Sunday morning sex disappears for a decade. Because you got little kids going, I'm hungry, I'm bored, play with me, cook me breakfast, I want to cuddle.
Right. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of couples reach this place of complacency like you were mentioning, and then you find yourself just suddenly coexisting. And so now you have to be more intentional about making that time for your partner, right?
Yeah, that's right. So after the habituation phase comes the expectation phase, where all the stuff happened at the beginning. We expect that stuff to be happening now. But the problem is, well, your kids stress, your work stress, you got career stress, you got money stress, all the stresses pile on, and people start taking their partner for granted. Now, after the expectation phase comes disillusionment, and in disillusionment, people look at their partner going, is this it? Is this my peak level of happiness? Right? And then often one person tries and agitates for change, and the other person either doesn't know how or doesn't think how important it is. And then what tends to happen then is couples slide into the perceptual reorientation or the threshold phase. Now, in threshold, you've got people talk about not communicating, or we're not on the same page. We have communication problems. They often the sex is boring, repetitive, or non-existent. Often they talk about like co-parenting, like flatmates co-parenting children. The desire's gone out, the intimacy's gone out, and the spark has gone out. And most people at that top point in time look at each other and go, should I stay or should I go? All right. So there are 6 steps from attraction to threshold. Most people take 12 to 18 months per step. So most people hitting threshold somewhere between the 6 to 9 year mark. And that's why the 7-year itch occurs.
Interesting.
It's almost like a clock.
Wow.
Yeah, and I can't tell you the amount of clients who sat down and they go, the first question I ask is, how long have you been together for? And they go, 7 or 8 years. I said, now let me make a guess. Is this what's going on for you? And they go, how do you know? Like, only because I remember it was a Friday once. This couple came in their own threshold, and I sat down and said, how long have you been together? Oh, 8 years. Is this what's going on for you? They go, how do you know? Oh, okay, because this is what's going on. And they said, have you seen anything like this before? And I went, only 10 times this week. Right.
Wow.
And a lot of people think that when they're having that experience that something's going wrong. Well, that's actually not true. Because that's a normal experience. It's normal for people to lose desire for their partner over time. And I say to people all the time, desire is not a natural function. It's not normal, nor is it natural to desire a partner over a period of time. Desire comes from both people behaving desirably and both people showing up in a desirable way. But people stop doing that over time, and hence, that's when people get to threshold. But I've got a really good pattern, a really good structure, and a really good program to get people back from the place where they're going, should I stay or should I go, to falling in love again.
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned that, because I think so many people, when they get married, they get caught up in this like kind of happily ever after, like, marriage should be like happy, dandelions and roses, when it's really not. There's a lot of hard things that can happen. And as you were
James,
mentioning,
oh man, like I've got a
yeah,
problem with the whole Disney happily ever after thing.
right.
I got a major problem with that because here's the thing: like, you see a Disney movie where the princess meets the prince, or a rom com where the reluctant girl meets a guy who overcomes his internal difficulties, and he sees her as beautiful, and then he persuades her to be with them, and they end up getting together, and they fall in love, and they're going to be together forever, live happily ever after. Well, happily ever after, like, it can happen. But I can tell you roughly, 87% of people that get together for the happily ever after thing don't end up that happily ever after. and because, in real life, because once again, you don't see on a Disney film, the prince and the princess 3 years down the track, they've got two screaming kids.
Mhm.
They both feel like they're exhausted. They feel like they've been hit by a truck. They haven't had regular sleep in about 18 months. She's got a little kid kind of, clamped to her nipple for 10 hours a day, drinking, breastfeeding. He's working 16-hour days to pay for the whole thing, and look at each other going, what the hell did we do? You don't see that on a Disney film.
Right. Yeah, like, you don't see a lot of, like, you don't see it, like, really, probably any in the case of a Disney movie, realism. But I think, like, and once we get to these places, I think a lot of folks are like, you become kind of disenfranchised in a way to where to feel like, "Oh, well, this isn't how it should be," or so that's what a lot of people's thought processes are. They're thinking, "Oh, my marriage isn't going well," and so, they reach a place to where, like, of course, some people, like, you might be contemplating divorce or, a
Yeah.
variety of different things.
Yeah, that's right. People think when they get to a place where they lose desire that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
But I can tell you really clearly from dealing with hundreds of couples a year, desire is not a natural function. It isn't normal, and it isn't natural to desire someone over a long period of time. And that's the thing people badly misunderstand the most. They think desire is always going to be there. Now, let me get specific about that word. I'm not talking about sexual desire, because you can have someone who is objectively incredibly attractive and their partner still not want to have sex with them. So desire, there's two types of desire. There's sexual desire and there's desire for the relationship, the wanting of someone. And it's that desire for the relationship that I'm talking about, that desire is not a natural function. I once had a couple, this dude, like, I'm straight as, right? I once had this couple, this guy he was a male stripper. He had a body built like a Greek god. He was 6'5". He had massive muscles. He had incredibly huge biceps. His thighs looked like bloody tree trunks. He was the most incredibly attractive man I've ever seen. Right? He walked in and went, "I'm straight, but that guy's Jesus. He looked good looking." And his partner she was a bikini model, right? And so two people who are objectively the most attractive people in the world, but their sex life was in the toilet. They hadn't had sex for 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's like, well, it, how does desire work in a circumstance like that? Right. So desire is not around attractiveness, although it's important to be attracted to your partner, but desire is about how people show up and how they show up in their relationship and behaving desirably. And when both people, over a period of time, what people tend to behave less desirably, they take their partner for granted. They think their partner's always going to put up with their bullshit, and they stop putting in any effort. And then their partner notices that's going on, and they do the same thing. And then you get circumstances where people end up looking at each other going, what am I here for? Because they're not trying to meet my needs and I'm not trying to meet theirs. So what are we here for? And if they understand desire and they have the will to keep working on their relationship, then change happens like that. It's so fast.
So is there a way that they can build that desire as it, like, kind of progresses, like, over the term of a relationship? Like, you kind of notice it's starting to fade. Is there a way that you can kind of bolster that to help improve your relationship?
Yeah. Well, the simple thing is consider how you behaved at the beginning of the relationship in the first 12 months and how you're behaving now and what's the gap. And in that gap is the happiness you seek. Like, how are you showing up?
I like that. That makes so much
Yeah.
sense.
So, what I can tell people human beings have 5 fundamental needs in a relationship. The first thing is time and attention, right? Attention is a currency of relationship. Yeah. Most people, I live in Australia, most Australians spend between an hour and a half to 2 hours per night with their faces in front of their mobile phones, right? So attention is a currency of relationship. You need to give your partner your time and attention. So, but at the beginning of a relationship, people did that a lot, right? Next thing is emotional intimacy, particularly important for women. So women need their partner to be interested in their emotions and care for them and respond to them. The next thing is sex. Well, sex at the beginning of the relationship is really easy because both people are behaving desirably. There's also substantial changes hormonally and neurologically at the beginning of 12 months to get people to have sex a lot. But over a period of time, that effect fades away. But it's really important to have good sexual engagement. Having time apart is important. There's the old saying in English, absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's important for people to give their partner the chance to miss them. But the final one is to feel desired, or to express desire, right? And so desire is really, I say to people all the time, some of the three best words in English language, as far as a lot of people is concerned, isn't I love you, it's I want you. I really want you, right? But over a period of time, people stop that overt expression of desire. And if I'm not getting it from you, and you won't give it to me. And then, so if I'm not getting it from you, then you're not going to give it to me. And then you get this mutual deprivation pact where people stop putting their
then it becomes this cycle.
Yeah. And then it becomes a downward spiral.
Yeah. So it kind of comes back to that like intentionality of relationships. Like when you find yourself kind of in that kind of complacency and you're kind of just like find yourselves going about your day. And honestly, I've, been married almost 18 years at this point.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And so, I still find ways to quote unquote kind of like fall in love with my husband again, right? But we've definitely been through a lot of these periods, as I'm sure many of our listeners have, of time where like, what are we doing? What are we here for? Right. And so I feel like a lot of that intentionality kind of comes into place, and taking that time, especially for women, as you were mentioning, to build that emotional connection. And, whether it's, I don't know, a date night or a block of time that you're carving out at the end of your busy day to connect, even if it's only for 15 to 30 minutes, is going to be really important.
Yeah, indeed. So those are the five fundamental needs in a relationship. And if people start working on those, it's actually things improve really quickly, right?
Yeah.
So time and attention. I'm a big fan of mobile phone curfews, right? Like mobile phones and particularly social media. Like if I could uninvent one thing in the world, it'll be social media. Like it just reeks. It's poison for relationships, and it's so damn addictive. I'll often tell couples, pretend it's 1985 and there's one phone in the house connected to the wall via a copper cable. How would you do your relationship then? Because the divorce rate was 20% less back then.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But it makes so much sense.
So people would do things where they would do things with each other. Time and attention. They would, they'd play card games, board games, do puzzles. They go out dancing with each other. They involve in, they cook with each other. They get involved with community things together. They do sport with each other. Because you didn't have an alternative. You couldn't sit on the couch and doom scroll for 2 hours while your partner's sitting 2 meters away, desperate to be touched. Right.
That is so true. Like, I don't know, for me personally, and I think for many people, like, we're just so addicted to our phones nowadays. And in the past, like, my husband's much better about this now. But like he would be like, would be at a friend's house and would be at like social events and be like on his phone. And I'm like, we had to have a serious conversation about that. I'm like, well, because he's like, well, I'm listening. I'm like, I understand. I understand, but like, it's not really the same as being present. We need to like be present. Like if you want to like, at the end of the night, we're laying in bed and want to do that, that's fine. But like, the phone thing can be a real issue, I think, for so many people. Like, I think there's like even, I think, phone addictions too. People are just so caught up, like, as you're mentioning, doom scrolling, Facebook, Instagram, games, and so on and so forth.
I say to people, and I'm joking, but I'm not joking, if you take half the amount of time you spend with your face in front of your phone at night, take the phones away and put your face between each other's legs, you're both going to be a lot happier. Right? And people think about it, they go, oh, yeah.
Right?
Like, are you recording this audio or video?
It's audio.
Okay. So you can see my video? Like I say to guys, this thing you do with your phone, your thumb going up and down, take the phone away and do it somewhere
Yeah,
else, right?
yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
And the guys go, "Oh yeah, you're right." Like
Right.
so people have a much better relationship with their phones than they do with their partner.
Oh my
They give
gosh,
it
it's, like, scary to think about, but it's so true.
well, and I'm in the process of saying, "Hey, this is what works." Like attention is a currency of relationship, and often a lot of. Do you have kids, Valerie?
No.
Okay. So did you have friends who have had young kids, like 2 or 3 year olds? Yeah. What happens to a 2 or 3 year old if it doesn't get mum and dad's attention?
Meltdown.
Yeah. Because as far as a 2 or 3 year old is concerned, in the absence of positive attention, a 2 or 3 year old will seek out negative attention because negative attention is better than indifference. Well, adults are 3 year olds grown big. So for the average human being, in the absence of positive attention, they will seek out negative attention because it's better than indifference. So what does indifference look like these days? Indifference looks like your partner with their face in front of their phone, doom scrolling. That's what indifference looks like. And when you take away the phones and give each other your time and attention, that need for picking a fight to connect with your partner goes away.
Mm. Yeah, that's such good food for thought.
Like,
And it's like we don't realize, like, how much that's actually benefiting us, by putting that phone down and putting it away, like, how much benefit that there is. I mean, even I myself have been guilty on it, like, when I'm working and I'm in the zone, like, I'm fully focused on what I'm doing. But,
sure.
like, there are times where, like, you know, could be on the plane or just, we're laying in bed before we're going to sleep, scrolling through Instagram when we probably should be going to sleep earlier, right?
Well, I'm a big fan of technology-free bedrooms. Like your bed should be the place where you have the most intimacy and connection with your partner. If you both got your face in front of your phones, you can't give your partner your time and attention because you're giving attention to your phone. Additionally, there's, look, the attentional system is closely linked to the arousal system. And so if your attention's focused on one thing, it's difficult to get aroused by something else. So if your attentional system is hijacked by Facebook and Instagram and you're looking at your partner kind of looks at you with a twinkle in their eye saying, "Hey, how about it?" You're like, "Oh, not in the mood right now." Right? But that's because your attentional system has been hijacked,
Yeah, and I
you
think
know?
it's so important to realize that because, like as I was mentioning with my husband, like he'd be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'm paying attention, I'm paying attention." Like we're say watching a movie or something like that. He's
Yeah.
still on his phone or whatever. I'm like, okay, like there's only like so much attention they can actually be paying. Like you might hear some words here and there, but it's not the same as being fully present.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Like I say to people, should be a special place. There should be only 5 things in a bedroom that start with S: sleep, sweet talk, sex, snuggling, and sucking. All right. Screen isn't one of them. Right. Like your bedroom is a place where you should be the most intimate with your partner. So
Yeah,
take the phones and TVs out of your bedroom.
I really like that because I've been seeing more and more folks like kind of like implement the phone free bedroom as you're just mentioning, and how much of an impact that it's made, like not even just for your relationship, for better sleep and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
overall health. It's like life changing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's right. And the thing about phones is they're actually designed for addiction. You know, there's no stopping signal with social media.
Yeah.
You don't get to 20 articles and then it says, okay, you've had enough. We've got to the end and you can put it down. No, the continuous feed, right? Whereas if you read a book, you're going to get to the end of the book and that's the end of the book. You get to the end of the chapter. That's a stopping signal at the end of the chapter. There's no stopping signal in social media.
Yeah. Or in my case, when I'm reading a book, generally it's before I'm going to bed, and I'm like, okay, my eyes are getting heavy. It's also another indication for me, at least.
Yeah. And, once again, I think the research is clear, never in human history have people been having less sex.
Yeah.
All right. And I think it's a good relationships have a good sexual engagement, and that needs to be something that's consciously chosen. But most people over a long period of time end up having what I call efficiency sex. Efficiency sex is a sex people have where one or both people can reliably orgasm in the minimum amount of steps, with the minimum amount of time, with the minimum amount of foreplay. Normally starts the same sequence of steps, sequence of positions, and normally starts with a tap on the shoulder at 9 o'clock at night when you're both exhausted, saying, "Hey, how about it?" Right? That's what most people end up having in long-term relationships. But it's not passionate, not hot, it's not intimate, it's not playful, it's not erotic, it's not fun. But really good quality sex has those elements. But often people have, because they doom scroll on their phone for 2 hours a night and their partner taps them on the shoulder and their attentional system's been hijacked by something else. And they're both exhausted. So if they do, even if they do say yes, the quality of sex they're having is actually really poor. It's efficiency sex. Now, if people have efficiency sex for pragmatic reasons, it gets the job done, but it's not, doesn't build intimacy. Yeah. So
it kind of makes me think of that whole term that people use for that situation where the wham bam thank you man. The efficiency sex.
It's efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't tell you the amount of couples that talk about this and they look at each other and they sheepishly grin, going like, "Oh yeah, that's us."
Right.
I had one couple and they went 10:30 on a Sunday night. I said, "What do you mean? That's when we do it. 10:30 on Sunday night. We know it's going to happen once a week, every week, 10:30 Sunday night." And I went, "Is that it?" And they, "Yeah, that's it." Right. And so, and sex, there've been a number of studies that show that people can. So there's a number of studies that show that it's really, really important to maintain a good sexual engagement. And people can maintain a vibrant sexual relationship for multiple decades. I've met quite a few of them. So, but it's something that doesn't happen by accident and it needs to be worked on.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that because I think some time ago I was talking to someone else about a very similar subject, and kind of like when we think about in terms of sex, having it for like practical or pragmatic reasons, and it's almost kind of like repetitious in a way, like as you mentioned, having sex at 10:30 at night every Sunday. It's no longer spontaneous, and so it's just like, okay, let's get it done, right? And so I think, yeah, I think so many people are kind of in this position to where it's just like, okay, well, it's been a week and it's this day, it's this time, rather than focusing on making it more spontaneous, making it more fun. Like, why does it have to be on a specific day and time, right? I understand, like, if, folks are working and the kids are asleep, that might make sense, to do it at, the end of the night, if that works for you. But like, it kind of takes the fun out of it because, and then you kind of start feeling like it's a chore having to do it on that same day and same time, and so I think like kind of making it more spontaneous is really, really important.
Yeah. So you brought up something that actually it's very well considered. People don't avoid sex. They avoid the meaning that's present or absent in the sex they're having or not having. So if you have sex that has a meaning of playfulness, of eroticism, of hotness, of fun, that's a lot more desirable sex. But if you change the meaning of sex to it's a chore, I have to do this to get my partner off my back, or I have to do this to make sure my partner can regulate their emotions.
Yeah.
If you change that meaning, desire for it dramatically reduces. So the desire for sex changes because of the meaning that it carries for us. So if you want to have, so there's the ways of improving a sexual relationship is you can change it. That's done by two ways. One of which is changing the meaning of it, and the other is changing the behaviors that bring intimacy, eroticism, playfulness, hotness, and fun. And I find it's actually quite easy to get couples to improve their sexual engagement. It's really, really easy to do. Well, it's easy for me to say the instruction. You don't have to go and do the work, but
right.
Yeah, but it's that changes in meaning that causes changes in desire for it. This is very, very common for a lot of mothers. Like once they have a baby, they've got the baby's like touching them all day, and then instead of at the end of the day, they feel like their body's been fully touched out.
Right.
They say they're touched out, and then the sex carries a meaning of it's a chore to keep the husband happy. So they do it not because they desire it, but it's that change in meaning that reduces the desire for it, right? And so by changing the desire, instead of thinking it's a chore I have to do to keep my husband happy, by changing the meaning of it could be mama's reward at the end of the day, mama's pleasure reward, right? That's an entirely different meaning for looking at.
Yeah, I love kind of how you flip the switch on that. And it kind of gives it like just basically changing your mindset in a way about it rather than like thinking like, oh my gosh, it's just this chore, rather than putting a positive spin on this. This is something that I get. It's almost kind of like when folks exercise, like, oh, I have to exercise tonight, rather than like, oh, I get to move my body and I get to feel good and I love how I feel after it. I feel like it kind of makes sense in this scenario too.
So by changing meaning, you change desire.
Yeah.
And so, and people view their lives and their partners through the desire that they have for them. And so and by changing meaning, you change desire. And then when you have, but then you get a positive feedback loop instead of a negative one. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
So pretty much whenever I deal with couples with challenges in their sexual relationship, I always deal with it from a perspective of meaning. And then the solution to it automatically falls out very, very fast. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm curious because you mentioned it prior to our conversation that you have a very unique take on relationships. Can you share with our audience a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, my unique take as I've been talking about it is, or talking through it, is that relationships come from both people taking responsibility for what they bring to the relationship. It's that emotional self-responsibility and bringing desirability to the relationship is what makes the relationship change really quickly. Yeah. And so there are a few behaviors that appear to me from dealing with, when we're talking to about 1,000 people a year about their relationships, there are a few behaviors that appear to me to be inherently desirable. And the first one is your ability to regulate your own emotional states. So when you feel like losing your shit and you don't, your partner looks at you and goes, "Oh, that's hot."
Oh, that is.
So the capacity for emotional self-regulation is one thing human beings find inherently desirable. Also, the ability to deal with conflict and to approach conflict well is also inherently desirable. But that also comes down to emotional self-regulation. So, and the other thing is, and a lot of the work so with every single client I talk to, I always talk to them around the importance of exercise as being fundamental for emotional self-regulation. And it's one thing that's uncommon these days. So emotional self-regulation is the foundation of a good relationship, and self-responsibility. So it's those two things, self-responsibility and emotional self-regulation, that drive the work I do with people. And a lot of relationship experts talk about communication as being important. Well, yeah, communication is important. But what I found is if you work with desire and if you work with the emotional self-regulation and self-responsibility, then desire comes automatically. Like it's like pouring a bucket of desire over them. And it happens so fast it makes your head spin.
Yeah, and I think it's like so underestimated, like the importance of the self-regulation and managing our emotions. Like there's several books that I've read on that actually. And I
Oh,
think
right.
and I say that because there are so many people that really struggle to regulate their emotions. Like it's a big struggle, and it's something a lot of times folks, I mean, generally, most ideally you'll learn it when you're a child, but a lot of people, are learning it later in life. And it's really important, especially in relationships.
Indeed, I say frequently people have relationships up to the level of their parents' relationship skills, because that's
Yeah.
where they learn relationship skills from.
Yeah.
Like the skills people that are needed for people to have a good relationship are not inherent. We're not born with them, we learn them. But most of how we learn them is we look from the adults around us going, oh, okay, that's normal, I'm going to do that. Well, there's a lot of people that don't have, their parents weren't the best role models for that.
Oh yeah. Speaking to the choir.
you know, and so the skills that appear to me being inherent or necessary for a good relationship is the ability to compromise, the ability to regulate your own emotional states, the ability to take responsibility for yourself, the ability to deal with conflict effectively, the ability to maintain a good sexual relationship, and the ability to find a middle ground whenever you're dealing with issues. Those skills are not inherent, that you have to learn them. But often you've got two people with, let's say, not well-developed skill sets get together with another person who has not well-developed skill
Yeah.
sets, and they learn how to go along. Whilst it's like I said all the time, it's like going to university. In university, you get the lesson and then you get the exam after. While in relationships, you get the exam while you're getting the lesson.
Yeah.
and it's
100%.
and it's a lot more intense learning process. But you're learning it with someone who might not have better skills than you, or they might have worse skills than you know. And some people learn really, really poor skills. Like I once had a client, and whenever, like, it's normal for couples for there to be one person that's conflict okay or wants conflict resolved, and it's normal for one person to be conflict averse or will shut down when the conflict gets too intense, right? And so this guy, he was one of the shutdown guys, right? But it's not only guys do it; women do that as well. But he was one of the shutdown guys who get to a point where you go, I don't want to talk about it, just not talk to it for 3 days. And I asked him the question once, like, you can tell me about your parents when you grew up. Well, what did you see as there being conflict? And he said, oh, I never saw any conflict when I was growing up. I said, what do you mean? He goes, oh, my mum was a single mum. She had 4 kids, and she was single for the entire duration of my childhood up to the age of 15. So he never, ever, ever saw conflict between two adults and how it was resolved effectively. He just didn't get that lesson. And then he gets in a relationship with a real life woman that was prepared to go, hey, I'm not happy with this is what's going on. Can we find a way to get our needs met? And he just didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. And I know from my own personal experience, for me personally, my role models growing up as far as conflict resolution were basically yelling, screaming, hitting, and my husband and I were both our each other's firsts also.
Mm-hmm.
And so his upbringing was different in a way, like, he had a loving dad. His mom was emotionally unavailable, got into a relationship with someone who was mostly emotionally abusive towards him, my husband. And once his dad passed away, he had to move into this situation. And so I think his view is kind of similar to your clients in a way where, like, he didn't really observe a whole lot of conflict. And so when we got us two together, it took many, many years for both of us for him
Yep.
to kind of learn, and then for me to basically unlearn what I learned growing up. So, and that's why we had many, many years where there was a lot of struggles kind of coming from like these difficult, kind of damaged in way, especially for me, like these backgrounds and like learning how to figure like this relationship thing out because neither of us really had good examples of that.
You've touched on something that's actually very wise. And so you're doing really good, Valerie, in the relationships. So one of the guys, relationship experts, and was a guy by the name of David Snarch, who wrote several, I think 2 of the best books ever written on relationships, which is A Passionate Marriage and Intimacy and Desire. And unfortunately, he died in 2020, but he was a Jewish relationship expert from New York. And he said that relationships are the crucible of human growth. Now, do you know what a crucible is, Valerie?
Kind of, sort of.
It's a vessel in which you melt metal. All right. You put metal in a crucible, you heat it up to a few thousand degrees Celsius, and it turns liquid. Inside the crucible, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, and it's difficult, but everything gets rearranged. Right.
Mhm.
So relationships are the crucible of human growth. I know when couples come to me when they're all emotionally, pretty bent up and pretty distressed, that they're in their crucible. And that it's that process of being in a relationship with someone that forces you to grow as individuals, but also forces your relationship to grow as well. And when that's happening, it's it's wonderful to see because that struggle, the difficulty, is purposeful. It's useful. It's useful for you as an individual, and it's useful for you as a human being. But it's also useful for the relationship. And when a lot of people get into that struggle, they think they shouldn't be having it, or they think it shouldn't be there. But I can tell them, and the reason why is when couples get into threshold, they're having that struggle, is because it's purposeful, it's useful, it can, it creates a greater sense of resilience. It creates, by forcing people to move through and work through their own stuff, that, and if it gets them to confront themselves about their own bullshit, about their lack of skills, about their sense of identity and how they're showing up and their self-perception, by forcing them into the parts of themselves they find uncomfortable, that's where that growth is. But you can't do that when things are easy. Yeah, growth and comfort are antithetical to each other. And so when people are in the crucible, that's when change really happens, and it really happens really fast, and and so when couples are in their crucible and go like, you're in a good place, like, I'm hating this. It's like, no, actually, what's going on for you is purposeful in this one.
Yeah, I just love that analogy. And that's so like wonderfully said, and it makes so much sense. And let's say if there's maybe a client or a couple that maybe that you've had in your practice that maybe have had a huge betrayal or maybe a conflict that has arisen, how do you help them rebuild after that?
Well, it's actually quite common. Like I see about 100 couples a year where they're dealing with some kind of breach of trust or betrayal or infidelity. So there's a number of components to that. You need to reestablish trust and trustability. You need to reestablish also the fact that it's not going to happen again. Yeah. I say to people all the time, there are 4 principles of dog training that work really well in human relationships. You need to train your partner like a dog, right? So the first one is always reward good behavior, right? If your partner does something good, you give them a treat, right? Next thing is never punish good behavior. And some people don't get that. Their partner does something for they want, and the partner does something they want, and they'll immediately criticize them how they did it, right? Well, if you told the dog, sit down, and the moment it sits, you kicked it in the head, what's it going to do? It's going to go, that's a crazy human being, and I'm going to withdraw away from them because I don't know whether if I do what I'm supposed to do, I don't know whether I'm going to be punished or rewarded. And the third one is never reward bad behavior, right? If your dog, walked into the living room and you had a beautiful Persian carpet and it took a dirty, great big steaming, smelly shit in the center of the carpet, you don't give them a treat, right? You don't reward bad behavior. So if there's a betrayal or infidelity, one of the first things you say is you have to draw a line in the sand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I once had clients say to me, they've been together for 24 years. And I went, okay, so wait here. Oh, well, he's had an affair. I went, okay. Is this the first time? No, he's had 12 affairs. And as far
Wow.
as I'm aware, he's got 2 or 3 favorite hookers.
Wow.
Hey, because she kept on rewarding bad behavior. She stuck around for 24 years.
It's really important to note. And I kind of want to go back a little bit because you mentioned, and I think so many of us are guilty of this, like you mentioned our partner does something that we want. And then maybe like, I don't know, for example, maybe it's cleaning the kitchen counter, something like that. And I'll just use a personal example. My husband's not the most detailed person and be like, this isn't as clean as I want it to be. And so like I feel like so many of us can like relate to it. Like, our partner does something that we want and we like it doesn't measure up for some reason in our eyes. And then like you mentioned, they'll get defensive. And it's just like so important to kind of like be aware of that, right?
Valerie, let's say you and I are sitting there and have a glass of gin, right? Talking about men. I can tell you really clearly, men desire 3 things from a woman above all else: peace, respect and support, and to feel desired,
That makes
right?
sense.
So you need to bring peace to his life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now he's getting probably a constant diet of correction and criticism from the
Right.
world, right? If he's going out and making his way in the world and providing and being a good man, he's going to have to push through obstacles all the time. The last thing he wants to do is come home and get a continual diet of that.
Right.
right? You know, one of the most effective communications I ever did, was with this couple that came in, and she basically just was berating him the whole, like, for the first 40 minutes of the session,
Oh, wow.
right? And I looked at her and said, "Do you bring peace to his life?"
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he looked at me, and his face like lit up, and he started smiling, and he realized why he was completely miserable. It's like, oh. And she goes, "Well, I would bring peace to his life if he did what I told him to do."
Oh. Oh.
Which,
Oh.
like, it's like, which is exactly the point. That's exactly why. And like that, those guys are looking at divorcing, and I said, well, and he just looked at me and he goes, "All I want to do is have peace. It's like, I just want to go to work. I want to come home. I want to go to the gym. I want to come home. I want to spend some time and have peace in my life. But every single time I get home, she's constantly telling me and yelling at me." And I went, okay. And I said, well, and he realized that was the bit of his relationship that it was missing. And he started smiling, he's like grinning from ear to ear, because he knew ending that relationship was a good idea. He shook my hand vigorously on the way out, and and I was like, and the moment he looked at me, he was fine. His face went wide eyed. I just winked with my left eye, and he nodded, and that was it. That was the communication, a wink and a nod. And he knew that he would never get peace with her. Right, so peace is really important. Respect and support. Like, so if you ask him to do something and it's not up to your standard, by you saying you did it wrong, that's punishing good behavior,
Mm.
right?
That makes sense.
And once again, if you've got a dog and you say sit, and it goes, "You didn't sit appropriately, I'm going to punish you." Well, what's the dog going to do? "I'm going to withdraw away from you because, can get rewarded."
Yeah.
Human beings, reward orientated animals, right? We go where the reward is. So if you never reward your partner, if you never let them know they're doing a good job, they'll go where reward is. I can't tell you the amount of men, when I've said that to them, they go, "Oh yeah, that's why I spend extra time at work."
Mhm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because whenever I come home, I know she's going to say it. There's something I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that scenario actually reminds me of one, and that's with my parents who were both divorced. I remember my mom had told me that, like, when her and my dad were in couples counseling,
Mm-hmm.
they had shown up to the counseling office, and my dad's like, "I'm just here to solve her problem." And he was very, I mean, I would give it to him. He was completely honest and said that he didn't feel like he had any issues whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And so they pretty much broke the therapist, and I think they were like, "Well, I don't think we're really going to make any progress today." And so, I mean, of course, they ended up divorced.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that just kind of came to the top of mind. So sometimes, like, you reach kind of a breaking point, and unfortunately, like, you go to therapy with the best of intents. Generally, unfortunately, may not always be on both parts. But I think it could be really eye opening if you might realize that, well, this probably is not going to work out.
Yeah, look, let me get back there, but let me just talk finally about desire, for men, right? Men need to know their partner desires them,
Yeah.
right? I can't tell you the amount of men I've spoken to, and I said, "When was the last time she made you feel desired, like really wanted?" And they immediately start crying, right?
Wow.
So that, I say all the time, the three best words in the English language as far as a man's concerned isn't "I love you." It's "come take me. Come over here and give me the best 2 minutes of my life." Right? Like, whenever I say that to a guy, 60% of guys immediately start blushing, right? Because unequivocal expression of "come take me" is an unequivocal 100% incredible expression of desire that they never get. And I can tell you, I've worked with hundreds of men who have cheated. Of all the men I've spoken to who have cheated, only two of them talked about sex. Just two, right? Every single other one talked about the fact that they felt desired and that their affair partner made them feel desired,
Wow.
right? And wanted. Whereas their affair partner made them feel desired and wanted, but they went home and their wife was giving them a diet of criticism and correction.
Makes so much sense, to be honest, though.
Yeah, like, once again, we're reward orientated animals, right? So all
Yeah.
mammals are, right? And so, you know, we go where the reward is. So, but getting back to what you said, so often people will, often couples, sometimes couples can come to a relationship counseling about 6 months too late. There's a saying in the relationship counseling community, often people show up 6 months too late. Some, I make a distinction between willingness and desire. The willingness is the willingness is the willingness to confront themselves and to go through the discomfort of change in order to have a positive relationship, right? Skill sets, I can teach. I can't teach willingness. And often people, when they rock up, they just don't have the skill sets because they never learned them as a kid. And they haven't been able to work through that with their relationship partner. Or their relationship with partner doesn't have the skill sets to have a good relationship, right? So but if both people are willing, skill sets can be acquired quite quickly. And particularly if they're automated and turned into habits, well, then my clients get happy and they go away. But willingness I can't teach. And sometimes one person is willing to go through the change, but the other person's checked out. And if that's the case, then that's a different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're kind of coming up on time, but if you could leave couples with just one piece of advice for a healthy relationship, what would it be?
Every day you need to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and go, how can I be as desirable for my partner as I can? How can I regulate my emotional states? And how can I bring my emotional regulation to my partner? Right? Also, exercise. Like the foundation of emotional regulation is exercise. You need to be doing 2 or 3 hours a week. Your heart rate's over 120. If both people wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to be as desirable for partners as I can, then relationship change really quickly. But it's something that has to be done every day. Relationships are a privilege granted to you by your partner, and that privilege is continually remade every day. A lot of people seek security in a relationship or think they've got more security in a relationship than we actually have until their partner goes, yeah, I'm done with you neglecting me and I'm out of here. So it's important for you to go, okay, I'm going to bring regulation. I'm going to bring desire. I'm going to be best version of myself to my partner. And then regardless of what they do, if you do that, then you can have the happiness you want and you can be at the heart of the change in relationship. Now, if you do that and your partner doesn't move with you, well, that's down to them. But if you don't do it, it's down to you.
Yeah, honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. That is just such perfectly said because it's like a muscle that we have to work, right?
Yeah,
Continuously. It's just like building any sort of healthy habit, really. And I think that's something that like any of us could probably work on. I'm always a big fan, like we can always be consistently, improving. Like, oh, there's always work to be worked on with ourselves
yeah,
and whatnot. And I think that's such a great piece of advice for our listeners to really take away. And I've learned so much just, at this conversation as well that we could be applying to our daily lives.
indeed.
And before we kind of close out, can you tell our listeners where they can find you, connect with you, work with you, or follow your
Sure.
content online?
So I have a YouTube channel called Rapid Couples Counseling. I have about 400 videos on my YouTube channel. I think it might be up to 410 now. So I cover all different kind of aspects. Yeah, I put a lot of content. So I think I'm doing about 7 videos a week on various different topics. There's topics in there on infidelity, on desire, on relationship dynamics, on intimacy issues. There's all different kind of topics there. So I live in Australia, but I do sessions with people all over the world. I've worked with couples in 10 different countries, and I can do sessions, for, either in the evenings, my time, or, we can work around time zones to do sessions. So you can find me if you look for if you go to the website rapidcouplescounseling.com.au, you'll find me there.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure I check that out. I'm on YouTube pretty regularly, and I'd love to see more of your content and learn from you. So I'll make sure I get those all down in our show notes below. But it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm excited for our listeners to hear it as well.
Yeah, thanks very much for allowing me to have this conversation. I'm trying Cupid's little helper. I'm running around like shooting little arrows, people going, ping, ping. So I'm love's servant, and the more love we can have in the world at this point in time, the better.
Oh, absolutely.